Welcome to my podcast, Today's Dream, Tomorrow's Reality. My name is Vicki Poole. I'm a master transformational coach and hypnotist specializing in habit change. And this podcast is sponsored by the Enlightened Peach, and it's all about embracing our mosaic life. And some of you may ask, what is a mosaic life anyway? Well, it is recognizing that all the pieces of our life, the good, the bad, the indifferent, have all come together to make us who we are. Change any one thing, and we are different. With that in mind, I invite you to embrace your perceived imperfections and celebrate who you are. This podcast is unedited and raw, just like life. And I am your host, and today I have a special guest. I will introduce in just a moment. And before I do, I want to ask you to do me a solid. And that means for you to leave a comment, ask a question on this episode right here. And then also to remember to like, subscribe, and share, because I have amazing guests on my podcast. And my goal is to help them get their story out to a broader audience. And the only way I can do that is with your help. So leave a comment or a question. And remember, also to like, subscribe, and share. So now let's get started. And this lovely lady right here is Katie Lane Dei. And we don't really know each other. I know just a touch about her. So I'm super excited to learn about her right along with you guys. So, and those that have followed me for a while know that I say this all the time, that I don't want to know too much ahead of time because I like being surprised right along with everyone. So when I go, oh, what? It is genuine, I'm telling you. So give them just a little touch about who you are, and then we'll go from there.
Yeah, so I am Katie Lane Dei. I am a developmental editor and a productivity coach for queer and women writers. And my main purpose is to empower authors through honoring their writing identity and who they are as a person and the way that writing influences their life because of that.
Oh, beautiful, beautiful. Well, now I just have to dive into this. So how did you get involved in this particular writing, and the people that you work with? And were you always wanting to be a writer? Tell us a little bit.
Yeah, it's been a long time coming. I mean, I think it took a long time for me to feel comfortable saying I'm a writer and claiming that space
Yeah.
outwardly. But I've written my whole life. I've been a huge reader. And I actually became an editor because I gave up on writing and still wanted
Ah,
to play with words.
yeah, yeah.
And through becoming an editor, falling back in love with writing, um, and then becoming comfortable calling myself a writer. So it's been ebbs and flows and so much into coming into myself as a writer. And then my audience or queer and women writers, it's always been really important to me to like champion voices.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and that meant things growing up as like taking leadership positions and helping out, new students out of school, or, doing this in different ways. And when I started editing, it felt like certain voices were just not being heard. And
Mm-hmm.
so, and certain stories were not
Right.
being heard, especially in the queer and feministic realms. And so that's when I was kind of like, these are really important stories. And these are stories that need to be empowered more than ever.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's kind of where I felt pulled to helping and assisting.
Okay. So when you say the queer, or what did you say? Queer or
Women
women
or
writers?
feministic, yes.
Feministic writers. Okay. Because I don't know why, just when you said the word queer, I thought, is that politically correct? That was the first thing that popped in my head.
Yeah,
So
it
I
is.
don't know.
It's, I feel like it's always changing. I
Yeah.
don't, I'm queer and I love the term, so I
Okay.
use it. Um,
Well, see,
there
my
are,
daughter's gay, and I have never heard her call herself queer. Never.
yes, yeah.
So I'm just curious.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I think it's just whatever you're comfortable with. I
Mm-hmm.
know for like allies and stuff, the easiest way is to do the LGBTQ community, um, and you know, and use that term that because it's all encompassing. But I think just kind of like claiming writer, like some
Mm-hmm.
people, want to say, author if that's what they are, and like claiming labels. It's all how you see yourself, how you feel
Right.
about it.
Yeah.
Um, I specifically am asexual, so for me, I feel more comfortable saying queer than saying gay, or using another term that, because queer also to me feels all encompassing.
Okay.
Um, so that's where I land with it.
Okay. I just had to ask. I'm sorry.
Yeah, no problem.
Well, you said there were no topics off limits, so I figured that
No,
was one, right?
nothing
Okay. All
off
right.
limits.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Perfect. Well, I will say I've had another guest on my podcast that was a writer, an author, and she was actually a hypnosis client of mine as well. And when we worked together with hypnosis, she said, she had this story in her head and she was really working hard on it. She was trying to get it to come out, but there was this other story that kept coming in and interrupting her and all these different things. And I said, well, maybe it needs to be listened to, and then you can come back to the other one. And she said, well, I might do that. But then part of her did not want to tell people that she was a writer because she thought, I don't have a book published right now. So how can I say I'm a writer? And then she said, well, what if I say I'm a writer? And they said, well, I mean, that doesn't sound like you. And, all these things. And she said, much less saying she was an author. It was like all these labels and stuff were really holding her back.
Yeah.
So one of the things, the task I gave her that day after we had our hypnosis, so it was a little easier after hypnosis, I will say, but I told her the first thing that she was supposed to do when she got in front of her computer was she was going to go on and she was going to change her description from whatever it was till she was a writer and an author. And I said, that's all you have to do today. And then let's see what happens. And she was shocked. Some people didn't even notice because, it does say that you've changed your status or whatever.
Mm,
And she said other people were saying, oh my gosh, that is so cool. So then she felt like it was okay to say that's who she was. And
yes.
since then, she's written, gosh, I don't know how many books she's written. She's a romance author. Um, and she is, she's amazing. And so I was so glad that I was able to help her with that label and taking that angst away from even commanding that word. And so you have people that are dealing with that in the same way, I'm assuming, right?
Absolutely, absolutely. I tell people all the time, so many people come to me for like the writing itself. And I mean, I'm an editor, so I've done that, but I'm really passionate about the mindset and the productivity side of things and how that
Mm-hmm.
works. So much happens here before you ever
Oh
sit
yeah.
down to type on the page. And that's what's stopping you.
Mm-hmm.
And they always say, like, oh, I just don't know enough to be able to sit down and write.
Yeah,
And it's like, well, there's your limiting belief right there.
that's all right. We have
Like
a
it's
lot of them.
already absolutely. Yes.
And
So,
I have a confession to make, and I've made this before on the podcast. So anybody that's been listening for a while knows I am writing a book. And I say
oh,
that term very loosely because I had a guest that was on my podcast and he was a writer and we talked, and after we got off, we talked a little bit more and everything. And then he reached out to me and said, hey, my publisher is looking for someone to write in this genre. Would you be willing to? Well, it's like, this is so far out of my wheelhouse. I don't know crap about it. And I thought, okay, that's out of my comfort zone. I'll do it. So I've got like these index cards with stuff written on it. I bought this board, this like you do for like science projects, it's the trifold board.
yeah.
And I still, believe it or not, have not got that board out and put the timelines on it. I do keep adding to the little index cards. I wrote one chapter, or maybe it's a chapter in my Word document, but it's like I've got a lot of things going on. I even downloaded this app that encourages me to write so many words a day, right? And
Mm-hmm.
it gives me this alert. Do I do it? No, no. But I always have a reason. Like the other day, it was like, okay, today I'm going to set some time aside, and I probably have my little note over here of exactly how much time I said I would put aside for it. And then when the time came, I looked at my calendar and I thought, oh, I've got this to go do. And so I didn't rearrange it. I just diverted away from it. And like it's here,
Mm-hmm.
and
Yeah.
I keep, and I'll just share, it's actually a, oh, it just went right out of my head. An apocalyptic novel.
Oh, wow. That's
Yeah,
exciting.
yeah. And it's all of the ideas that I've got are so cool. And it's
Yeah.
like I've been doing strange things to kind of get in that mindset of what would be happening. So I go out at night and stand in the yard, see what I can hear. And if I close my eyes and there's no lights, what's going on? How do I feel? And those kinds of things. And then when I do something and I think, well, if we didn't have power, could I do that? And so I'm doing all those things, but it's like it's not coming out of here onto the page.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
You feel me, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So what would you say to me or to someone else that might be experiencing the same thing? I mean, the story's there, and I even know certain things that are going to happen, but I have not. So
Done
go.
it. Yeah. Go. It's a lot of different things. So one, I would say if you're someone who is a planner or like schedule is, their week, you do have to
Oh, I'm
prioritize
not
it.
normally
No?
a planner. It's
Okay.
like
Okay.
the only reason I say that I had to schedule it is because like I'm doing all the podcasts and I'm getting really close to my 100th podcast. So I am, diligent about how many I've got. So like I've got a calendar on the wall and I
Mm-hmm.
still have a full-time job. And so I'm working that in. So I have this calendar on the wall. I have the calendar on my phone, and it's like, and that way I'm a planner. It's that because I got to make sure that I show up on my day job, and then I show up for the podcast, and I show up for my hypnosis clients and these classes that
Right.
I'm
Right.
doing. So my time is a little constricted sometimes,
Mm-hmm.
but I can find time to just go sit sometimes. And sometimes just to relax, I'm putting a 1,000-piece puzzle together. So I just go in like a couple of minutes. It's like I'll just go do 5 pieces just to kind of decompress.
Mm-hmm.
But I could do that with the writing too, but that's not what I'm doing,
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah.
So
I think if I would have to dig into it a little bit deeper and get to
okay.
know your mindset a little bit more. But one thing I love to say is if you can think it, but you can't write it, you can probably still speak it. And so I tell people, use your voice memos and just, when you're thinking of that moment, if you can, you see the scene exactly as it is, you can speak it and then you can transcribe it later and go in and fiddle with it. So much of the book actually happens in editing that the first draft is just proving that you can tell the story and that you can put words on a page and that you can reach the end.
Okay.
So
So
having all the pieces,
don't
don't
stress.
stress.
Yeah, yeah. And
Yeah,
one
yeah.
thing that the guy who asked me to do this, one of the things he did tell me that has been helpful if I was still, really well, we won't go there. But he said, don't worry about what's first chapter, second chapter, third chapter, and all that stuff. He said, just write it. And then once we get to the end of that, then we can put it where it needs to be. And,
Absolutely.
but it's like my mind doesn't think that way. It's like, I
Mhm.
feel like I'm supposed to go in order. So I started, with the night the lights went out, and then I feel like I should be on the next day. So it's retraining how I'm looking at things
Mhm.
as far as being able to just write.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think everyone's process is different. And if you think chronologically and you're kind of seeing it chronologically, there's no reason you can't write it chapter 1, 2, 3, 4. And then when you go back to reshuffle, you might then realize like, oh, something needs to happen in between these, or actually chapter 2 really needs to be chapter 4. things are going to
Okay.
change.
That makes sense.
Yeah, but you can put things in. And I would say too, a lot of times with my like chronological writers, it's hard. You get stuck somewhere and then you're like, I can't continue because I need to go chronologically. So just putting a placeholder in, like just saying like somehow she, the character reaches C,
Mm-hmm.
space C, and then you can continue on. You're like, gotta reach the end of chapter 3 somehow, but maybe
Okay.
you know what comes next,
Okay.
and then
Oh,
you can
that's very
continue from
helpful.
there.
Very helpful. Thank you.
Yeah, of
Thank
course.
you. I see why you get paid to do this, right?
Yeah.
So going back to when you were really little, when is the first time you remember actually sitting and writing a story?
Um, Sitting and writing a story, probably first grade, probably like
Okay.
7 years old.
Yeah.
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 Yeah, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, I have a client that her granddaughter is about that age, and she says she's writing a novel. And so one of the books that I have is the emotion thesaurus, so that I
Yes.
can describe things a little bit better. And so I was mentioned that to her. So that was what she bought her granddaughter for Christmas, was that book to help her with her novel. And every time I see her, I say, so how's the novel going? She said, well, she's still writing it.
That's amazing.
Yeah,
Oh, I
isn't it?
love stories like that.
Yeah.
I love seeing, I remember I was in like junior high age. I was like 13 or 14, and they had a bunch of authors come to speak, and one of them was a 10-year-old. And I remember being like, that's incredible. Like I love that. I love seeing these young kids writing. Like it's
Yeah.
amazing.
Well, one of my daughters, I don't know that it's her favorite movie anymore, but it's called The Kissing Booth.
Yes.
And that was written by a young girl, right?
Yes. Yeah.
And it is a cool movie, right? And so it's like when she told me, she said, well, that was written by a real young girl. And she was early teens. You might know exactly how old she was, but it was like when I watched that movie with her, I thought, whoa. And so
Yes.
my daughter even got the book and read it. And so it's always amazing how somebody so young can be so imaginative, but
Yes.
really when I get down and I think about that, I think I was so imaginative at that age, because it's like fantasy land, you play with something and suddenly it's real, so I guess it might be a little easier, but it's like trying to get myself into a space where it feels kind of like I can get that imagination back from when I was little.
Absolutely. I feel like
Yeah.
I'm chasing that all the time.
Yeah.
I feel like, emotions were just more. And,
Yeah.
when we're
Yeah. Yeah.
younger and you feel everything so deeply.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
it's funny, when I've got a Facebook group that is I have a lot of people in there and I work with them, and I'm helping them. It's called Make Lasting Change. And so it's really a cool place. And in that space, I've got people that are wanting to, change so many things about their life. And so I've got this lady that's going to be coming in, and she's actually going to be doing a workshop with me and a program with me, but she teaches, um, oh God, the word just went right out of my head. Hold on a second. Um, Improv. She teaches improv.
Oh,
So
fun.
we're going to be utilizing her teaching them improv to get them back into their creativity, to get them back into that space where they can just kind of think on the fly and just have fun. And so I'm super excited about, sharing her in the group and having this program and everything with her, because as adults, we become so adults that we don't find the time to play. And like I shared with you before we got on here, that the reason I started my podcast was so I could have a voice and I could just say anything I wanted to. Well, there are times that I'll be somewhere and a song will come on and I'll want to pop into singing and dancing. Well, I'm not a good singer. I'm not a good dancer either. And then I'll look around and it's like, ooh, and then I don't. you know?
Yes.
And so I'm looking that by doing this with her as well, that maybe the next time that song comes on and I'm out in the middle of something and I decide I would love to sing or dance, I just damn do it. Right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
I saw something on a TikTok a few months ago, and I can't remember exactly what it was, but it was basically someone saying, when you think about the last time that you were embarrassed or ashamed to do something, was it because you hurt someone? Was it all of these like negative things, or was it simply because you were afraid of showing your joy? And I was like, oh, that's life changing, like
Yeah. Yeah.
why are we so fearful of sharing our joy? Because we're afraid of what people are going to perceive.
Yeah.
But then you see videos all the time of someone randomly singing and dancing, and you have joy from
I
watching their
know.
joy.
I
Yeah.
know. It's kind of it's a mind blowing to look at that the thing that
Yes.
brings us joy, we hold back from doing it and we're actually keeping them from having joy. But it's like in the moment, it's like,
Yeah.
whew, what will they say?
It's
What
hard.
will they think?
Right.
I will be embarrassed, especially if somebody says, don't quit your day job.
Yeah.
And that could happen.
Yeah.
I sing really good in a crowd. I can be in the choir all day because I can mimic whatever is going on around me, but have me carry a tune when I'm by myself, not so good. All right, so that first time that you were writing, you were very young,
Very young.
and so was it something that you remember? Do you remember the story that you wrote?
Yeah, actually, our school did like a writing thing. Like we all wrote books, that the whole
Well, that's
first
really
grade.
cool. Where did you go to
Yeah.
school?
It was a very small public school in Alabama. So
Interesting.
yeah, and I don't know if I haven't heard that they're still doing it or anything like that, but yeah, it was really
That
crazy.
would
And
be
so it was
something to
just
get into the schools, wouldn't it?
absolutely.
Yeah.
And like you had to illustrate it yourself. And so it was just you would speak it or like write it out, and then the teacher would like type it up, and it was really, really cool. And so that's the first one I remember doing.
Now that you mentioned that, my son, when he was probably just a little bit older than that, he wrote a book at school, and they even had the book printed and hardbound.
Yeah. Yeah.
Is
Ours
that what you?
wasn't, but I do know that they had like my older siblings had the same thing.
Yeah,
Yeah.
bizarre. I need to go find that book. It's on a bookshelf somewhere. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, you're good. I just yeah, I mean that's what I remember. And it was a crazy story too. It was like a girl went outside to play, a girl my age, a young girl with her friends, and then went missing, and then they found her and she was okay, and everyone lived happily ever after. But um it was just a very short little piece, but that was like the first time I remember really writing my own
Hmm.
book.
Yeah. So, do you remember if you had a fear of getting lost or being taken?
I have no idea. I thought it was so crazy because I brought it up to my mom before, because I was like, what was going on? And she was like, I honestly have no idea. She's like, she says I've told stories since I could speak. And she's like,
Yeah.
you would just like whatever story you could have, like you would tell. Um, but my aunt lives near like some woods and stuff. So I wouldn't be surprised if I was like, oh, don't go. Cause that was always, don't go in the woods. You stay on,
Yeah.
you stay outside.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah.
Okay. Well, the reason I said that is because my son did have that fear because I put it in him. I didn't realize it. But, there
Mm,
was a lot of, at the time when he was young, there was a lot of little kids being kidnapped, a lot of
yeah.
them, right? And so they had this movie on TV, and I think it was called My First Name is Steven. And so we watched this together. So, because I told him, I said, when I say it's not safe to do things, it's not safe to do things. And
Right.
so we watched this movie, and afterwards, he was scared to death that he was going to be kidnapped. And it was like in his
Mm,
mind all the time. Well, hell,
ugh,
all I was trying to do was say, don't go with strangers, don't do all these
Right.
different things. But yeah, so I did it to him.
You never know
I
what's gonna
fully admit
stick. Yeah.
it.
It's funny to think about. I've had conversations with my parents before of like, oh, I remember, this, and it was like such a big deal to me. And they were like, I don't even know what you're talking about,
Yeah.
and it's so like when you're so small, everything is so big.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's amazing. It's amazing. I'm assuming you don't have children, right?
No, I did not.
No. Okay.
No.
So just remember this story when you have children.
Yeah.
Don't tell them that stuff, don't put the fear in them. But I will say recently I saw a little thing, I think it was on Facebook, where they did these little things where they were asking kids stuff, and they said, okay, so if somebody came up to you and said, come and see my puppy, what would you say? And the kid said, where is it? So it's like you do have to say certain things,
Right,
but I guess I
absolutely.
think there might have been a better way for me to do it. I'm just saying, when you have children, don't scar them.
I will
If
try my
possible.
best. Yeah.
Okay. Well, so you wrote that story, and so do you remember if that was the catalyst for, another story, another story, another story? It was that you got that feel in you of the story's out. So what was there? You do
Yeah.
remember the thoughts that went through your mind?
I really like, this is one thing I say to like adult writers who fell in love as adults, is like,
Yeah,
that catalyst, where that was. And
yeah.
I wish I could nail it down. So much of my childhood, I remember writing different things. It's hard to pinpoint what exactly was the moment that became became, the catalyst moment.
The thing that you
Uh,
wanted to do forever.
right, right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So then tell me, if you don't remember that, you remember the time when you said, well, I'm just going to edit for everybody else because
Yeah.
I'm not going to write. When did that happen?
Oh man, yeah, that happened when I about 8 years ago. Yeah,
Okay, I thought you were
about
going to
eight
say
years
8 years
ago.
old. I thought, damn,
No,
girl.
yeah, yeah. 1 year of bliss. uh, no, thankfully bliss lasted for a while. But about 8 years ago, I gave up. I had this one story, and um the first idea is always exciting, and you start to write, and then with that story in particular, I just kind of fell out pretty quickly. um
Meaning,
Meaning, I was very intrigued by this story, and then I started writing, and then I started saying, I don't think this is good. I don't think this is
mm,
good enough, and I don't think this is a good story or a good premise to start with. Like, I should move on to something else. But similar to what you were speaking on earlier of that other author, I couldn't let go of the story. But then I also couldn't write. So I spent a few years writing and trying to get the words out. And it took me about 5 years, and I got 25% of the way through. And I was just struggling and struggling. And I was like, I'm done. Like, if I can't make this work when all I can do is think about it, then it's just not meant to be.
yeah,
And I love words, and people were asking me to assist with their papers and whatnot. And so I was already kind of editing at that point. And I was like, I'm just going to go all in on editing. I still get to read when I want, and I still get to play with words. It doesn't matter whether I'm a writer or not. I can just be with words, and that's enough for me.
mm-hmm.
Um, and so I completely just like let go of it. And it was okay in the sense of like, I hadn't claimed the space as a writer. People knew that I read all the time, and that I would like write little things, but didn't know I was on this like journey of writing a novel. Um, and then when I went all in on editing, I started researching editing and diving into these different things. And around the same time, I was like looking at like productivity tools, and I was discovering all of these things to help writers that helped me in turn as well. And I kind of realized that there came a point where I just knew so much, and I was talking and I was surrounded by writers, and I realized that they didn't even know all of the craft part of things that I knew, but yet somehow, why couldn't I write? And so that's when I started learning about like the mindset piece. Um, and yeah, and once like that clicked with everything else, I was able to finish in 2 years, I was able to finish two big manuscripts. So like about 100,000 words for each.
Ooh,
And I
wow.
got
Those are
a,
big.
yeah, and then I got a short story finished and published and wrote other short stories. So when it took me 5 years to write 25,000 words. And then in 2 years, I wrote over 200,000 words just
Wow.
from like changing my mindset
Right.
and working
So
with
those
productivity.
two manuscripts, have they been published?
They are not published. One of them will probably never see the light of day. It's one it's
It's
a
your
story dear
baby?
to me, but it's my baby, yes. And then the other one is in revision mode, and yeah, so that's where that one's at.
All right. So do you have a plan for when it will be published? Is that on the agenda right now?
Yeah, so I will the plan is to start querying it out. I want to try to go the traditional route at the moment. So I'm going to try to query it out.
What does that mean?
Send like letters to agents and
Okay.
with the story to see if they're interested in it.
Okay.
And yeah, I'm thinking about starting that in the spring of next
Okay.
year. Yeah.
Of next year.
Yes, yeah. So
Okay.
revisions, I probably have like two more drafts of
Okay.
it before it's polished and like ready to take that next step.
Do you have beta readers and stuff too?
Not yet, not at the mode I'm at. Right now, I'm just in the editing phase. But I do have a pool of people I have like a writing group that I'll probably send it to.
Okay, very cool. I only know about the beta readers from my client that did the hypnosis and stuff.
Yeah, beta readers are incredible. I mean,
Yeah, yeah.
you
She says she
absolutely,
loves her beta readers. And
they're
I
amazing.
had the privilege of going with her because we've also become friends. And so she was doing a book signing, and it was one of those where they have a meet and greet and everything. And it was like it was all romance novelist, and it was like at
Oh,
this big
fun.
auditorium thing, and there were just tables and booths and stuff, right? And she had someone that was supposed to go with her to help man her table, and they ended up backing out at the last minute. So she asked me, so I said I'd love to go. So I was there and got to go with her to the meet and greet. And I was, I would actually see somebody walking by and say, come on over here and meet April. And and because I love to talk to people, especially when it's not about me, right?
Right. Yeah.
Right. And then I was at the table with her, and I got to, pull people in and tell them some things about her books. And I was fascinated because, these were all romance novelists. There were people that were pulling wagons because they were buying that many books from people. And it's like, oh my gosh. I mean, and I'm not talking about little wagons. They were big wagons. They were hauling all this stuff, and they had things in their arms. And I mean, it was something I had never experienced in my life. So it was amazing. And all of those authors, even though some of them didn't know each other, it was like they were all friends. And,
Yeah.
after the thing, we went and sat at this bar, and some people were drinking, some people weren't, but we were just having conversations in the best time. And I thought, man, this feels good. This feels amazing. Now, I'm not a romance author, but who the hell knows, right? I didn't think
Yeah.
I was this other author either. Um, I've only written like poetry and stuff, nothing ever published, but I wrote a chapter in a book that was an anthology that was published, but it's out of print already because the publishing house went out.
Mhm.
But so I do have something in print. And that was so much fun to get that story out. So I'm psyching myself up here, you can tell,
Yes.
to
Yeah.
get into my story a little bit more, and take some of your advice and actually, put things down on the paper or on a voice message or whatever I need to do to get it out, because I think it gets stuck right here.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like you said, it's like, it's in here, and then it's like, so beautiful. I appreciate you so much.
Yeah, of course, of course. Yeah, the camaraderie around the community among writers and authors is so it's just beautiful, really. And
Yeah.
it's so funny because that is such a big thing for it's the label of like, I can't call myself this, I can't call myself that. And kind of like you mentioned, like once you do, there's no one sitting there saying that, no, you're not a writer. No, you're not an author. You know, they're usually saying, join us. Hey, we're here too.
Yeah,
Come
yeah,
hang out.
yeah.
Um, yeah,
And one of the things that I loved about it is that, in so many arenas, there is such competition between people that I won't show you what I've got. And these people were helping each other, and like they were male models there. And I actually interviewed one on my podcast because it was so fascinating. He had a day job, he was married, had kids, but he was this male model on these books. It was like, you lead a double life. I've got to talk to you.
yeah,
But but the thing was amazing to me is that they were all helping each other. And they were even like, when instead of being competitive about, come to my table, come to my table, and all, they would talk. And sometimes they would walk over to somebody else's table and say, come on over here. And I was like, wow, the whole essence of it was so different, because I didn't see, the whole time I was there, and we were there for 2 days, I didn't see 1 ounce of competition between any of them.
yeah. It really is. Like it truly is like that a lot of the times. Like once you find your space, so many people think like, oh, I'm a romance author and they're a romance author, it can't work. But I think so many of us are also readers, so we understand that once I like, if I am a romance reader, like I just want more and more and more, you know?
Yeah, yeah.
So
Hence
there
the reason
is
they had wagons full of books.
exactly, exactly.
Yeah,
Yeah, and you see that and you're like, oh, well then let me just add mine to that
yeah,
wagon
yeah,
too.
yeah. Let me do it. Let me do it.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was amazing. So one of the things that you had said is that, you got involved with the queer writing community because the voices were not being heard and the stories were not being told. So what are you referring to? What is that about?
Yeah. So and it's still going on now. There's a lot of book banning and there's lots of censorship. When I
Because
was
it's about being queer, or because it has sexual content? What is it? Or is it
all of
all
the
of it?
above. It's
Okay.
all of the above. And I think that also there's um this thought in minds that queer is sexual. It's just automatically one,
Mm,
you can't have one without the other. When it's like that's not the case. You have stories all the time of a boy falling in love with a girl and there's no sex involved. Why
right,
do you think it's going to be different just because they're both men or they're both
right.
boys or they're both whoever? Um, so there is that misconception that happens a lot as well. But we we've seen in the traditional publishing realm a lot of it was very obviously in the olden days white male dominated and living in the US we still live in a white heteronormative society, and so that is slowly we feel and see things changing, but when I started my work it still was not as prevalent.
Hmm.
um so at that time it was just kind of like just getting your voice heard as a woman writer writing heteronormative stuff was hard enough, but now we're
Right.
trying to show up, and now we're trying to show up not only as women but also as queer women, and that is just or women of color like is another like level as
Yeah.
well.
Yeah.
And so I was a volunteer intern with We Need Diverse Books, and they're a nonprofit that like pushes that stuff out there. And seeing it from that end of like how hard it was for other authors and stuff to come in, um, was really empowering to say like, okay, it was hard for them and they're making it easier for others, but there's still so much work that needs to be done. And then now with book banning and censorship happening in all of these states
Yeah.
more than ever, people are feeling both like they're not. enough and that they can't write their thing because even if they do, it's going to get shut down. And then also they're feeling very tokenized. I've had so many writers who are like, it's going to take me a couple of years to write this book. I don't even know if there's a point to me writing this book because maybe no one's going to want queer stories in 2 years.
Mm,
Maybe I'm only important right now, which is another mindset thing. And
yeah,
so
yeah.
there's so much of
That's
it
one I
that's
wouldn't
like,
have thought of.
yeah, that
Yeah,
I just want to like grab them and I want to empower their writing identity, but I also want to empower them, like
right.
claiming the label as writing is important too, but you can't you can't claim that label when you can't claim your life that you're trying to write about.
Yeah.
So
So does it, and I'm just asking as a question because I don't know. So does it work if you are just maybe changing the mindset of I just want to get my story out of my mouth and on the page? Or does that um invalidate the process or something?
no,
Do you
not
know
at
what I'm
all.
saying?
I do,
Um,
yeah.
Yeah, because like the thought of maybe it's not going to be wanted in 2 years. Well, when it gets done. But the thing is that if you got your what's in your heart out on the page, to me, it feels like, and it feel this way because I haven't gone through all of that, but it feels like if I can get it out there and I sell one, even if it's just to me, I'm good, because I will have written something and got it
Yes,
out
yeah,
more because I felt so validated with just that one chapter in that book. And it was
right.
like, I bought a whole bunch of them, I sold some of them, I gave some of them away. And it was so, I actually thought, oh, I should just go up to Barnes and Noble and just stand with my book. But it's like, it felt so good that I would feel like, or I would think that it would be the same way no matter who you are with getting that out.
Absolutely.
Right?
I
Okay.
think, yeah, I think a lot of it goes hand in hand. Um, you empower one side of you, and especially with writing, because a lot of the time, especially if you're queer and you're writing a queer story, claiming your space as a writer, getting that mindset of being able to tell that story through telling the story, you start to claim your space,
Yeah.
and validate yourself. And I completely agree. Like finishing that story, then you can say, okay, I have this story. You might still have the thought of like, but does it matter now? And then we can work on that of saying, this is a story that you needed, you know, why do you think no one else is going to need it? You know?
Yeah. 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 Definitely. And, I think that's what we do to ourselves a lot of times. It was like,
Absolutely.
I needed it so bad growing up, but, they don't need it from me. I get
Hmm. Yes,
it.
yes, absolutely.
We can do that a lot. Well, we're getting close to time. So is there anything, because I know it feels like we've skated through a whole bunch of stuff, and I think I've added too much of me in here, and it's supposed to be all about you. So is there something that I didn't ask you that you want to make sure that you say to the audience? Is there the last thoughts that you want to get out? Whatever you want to do right this minute, go for it.
Okay. I think you asked lovely questions and I loved the conversation, the way it flowed. One thing I'll say is I do have a free webinar that I give to people that's all about finding your writing process. And so it talks a little bit about the mindset and the productivity and like how to get out of your head and get unstuck on the page, which is a lot of what we've, discussed here.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'll provide, all the information for that, but that's just a free webinar of like, what does it mean to have a writing process that works for you, no matter what barrier you're facing when it comes to writing.
I'll
And
be
yeah,
signing up for that. So let me
yeah,
let me ask you real quick, and this may be putting you on the spot. I don't know, but there are a lot of people out here that teach writers, right? Because
yeah.
I've met some just in the past month. I've met several, right? So what is different about you that would really have somebody saying, "Oh, Katie is the one that I need to talk to"?
I think for me, I know a lot of writing coaches work specifically on the writing itself or on craft. My focus is on mindset and productivity. I want to empower your story. I want to honor you as a writer. And kind of teach you the mindset. How do we make it work with productivity to be able to finish your draft? And so I actually have a 12-week program where I take you from unstuck all the way through a finished draft by
Oh,
hitting, these certain points within 12 weeks.
oh yeah.
And so I think that is like my thing is, sure, I'm an editor, so I can help you with the words and things later. But right now, we just need to focus on getting it on the page
Right.
and doing it in a way that you don't feel guilty and that you feel empowered.
Right. Beautiful. Oh, I love that answer. I love
You're-
that. So I think you need to also have a link for that thing too, because they'll
Absolutely.
probably, once people have heard this, they might be looking for, I want to just jump right, let's forget that free masterclass, man. I want to get into this program. You said it's how long?
12 weeks.
12 weeks? Oh, sounds perfect. All right. So I'm so grateful to have had you here today, and I've learned so much from you. I'm very appreciative. I will definitely sign up for the masterclass, and I'm going to look at your 12-week thing too. But it's like, you know how I am with the time thing right now. I got to see what I can commit to, right? Because I want to make
Absolutely.
sure that if I do it, I can commit to making sure I do it, and it's not one of those things that I stop and start, right?
Absolutely.
Or
Absolutely.
start and then stop. I don't stop
Yeah.
first. You knew what I meant. You knew what I meant. Okay. All right. So thank you everybody for being here. And I'm so appreciative of Katie. And then remember to leave a question. I mean, ask her a question, something, and then she can check back and see, what they are, and she can actually answer you, and sign up for her free masterclass, sign up for her 12-week program. And it's going to be a beautiful journey. I can see you being part of this for quite a bit, and so thank you so much. So I'm going to leave everybody with the quote that I just love: the best way to predict the future is create it. So what are you creating? And with that, I will say thank you so much. Bye-bye. Mwah.